All right. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you happen to be. It's Friday, January 12th, and this is another episode of MSP Confidential. We come to you live every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And I have the pleasure of welcoming a couple of special people today, Mr. Rob Rae and Dan Wensley. How are you, gentlemen? Welcome.
Thank you. Awesome.
Hey, Luis.
It's been a somber week in the channel this week. We lost one of our own, Mike Cullen of N-able, who's been part of the community and really the MSP ecosystem since the beginning, one could say. And the topic that I had thought of talking about with Rob today was, interestingly enough, this idea of the MSP opportunity. And just judging by a lot of the comments, a lot of the posts and things, over 100 comments on CRN's post about Mike. It was interesting to see how many people recognized his input, his early impact in the whole MSP ecosystem and this transition that we went through. And I thought that'd be an interesting thing to talk about. Of course, perhaps we can start with a quick comment about Mike and your experience in having met and worked with him, and just your thoughts. Rob, start us off.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It was it's been it's been an unexpected loss by anybody's count for sure. And I feel for the team over at N-able because he's been a stalwart there for a couple of decades now, and everybody that's come into interaction with him. My first experiences with him were as a competitor, literally across the street in Ottawa, working for Dan. And even as a competitor, I mean, he was ruthless. He made us know exactly where we sat. But at the same time, we were all trying to get the reseller channel moved into managed services. We were all trying to push the rock in the same direction there. So there was some collaboration. There was some working together to a certain extent. It wasn't until a few years after leaving. Level platforms, it was the competitor to N-able, that we finally had an opportunity to connect and get to know each other. I wish I had spent more time with him. I wish that I had been able to pick his brain a little bit more, because he was for sure a wealth of knowledge, and you didn't come across anybody in this industry that didn't have anything positive to say about him.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, Dan, I know you were also around those times, level platforms, and coming across Mike and his work and the competitive nature. I saw a number of people comment specifically about how, even though there was competition, it was always sort of in the interest of raising the tide for all boats, and how Mike was really driving the industry forward in many respects. And I'm curious about your thoughts and experiences too.
Yeah, it's this week, unfortunately, has really impacted a lot of us in a pretty significant way. As Luis, you and I were talking about when you planned MSP Confidential to have Rob on it. Rob and I go back so many years. Luis, you and I talk about this as we work together at ScalePad. We talk about it regularly. Just the profound uh, impact that the channel has had on not only obviously the industry, the MSPs, and the vendor community, but the people surrounding it. Over the last couple of years, talking to Weeks out on the road, and David, I'm talking about, and he's talking about Mike Cullen retiring, and I had a sense of significant sadness to even the thought that Mike was going to retire out of the industry and he wouldn't be a part of it. So, Dave and I talked so many times over the last number of months at events. I said, I got to come out. Oh, we're doing a retirement party for Mike. And I said, I've got to get out back out to Ottawa. And between, Toronto and Vancouver, I'm rarely in the Ottawa region, as Rob and I used to be pretty regularly for 7 years. So the thought of him even retiring out of the industry was impactful enough. To hear the devastating news this week was just that, devastating.
Yeah, truly. And I came across the thought, perhaps a little selfish, but because so many people have known him for the 20 plus year time frame, and of course, relationships grow deeper and the roots grow deeper. But it's interesting that so many folks that have only known him for a handful of years, myself included, I met him in 2020 when I went over to N-able. His impact was just so deep in even a short period of time, just on a personal basis. And I've talked to so many folks over the last couple of days that had such deep personal experiences with him, because he was a mentor and a friend, above sort of the professional side of things. And he was that to so many, and he certainly championed folks at N-able in the industry. He did that for me when I joined the company, helped me see sort of the big picture. And, we text here and there and always chatting about the industry and what's happening. He always kept that finger on the pulse. And yeah, so it's definitely a tough week, but it really, I think, underscores how much this community has meant to so many people, and just the impact that he hopefully, and legacy he leaves for us to continue sort of leading that with that baton. The community is just a key part of who we are as a people, as an industry.
As both you and Rob certainly emulate, I think it takes the amount of change we've all gone through in the last number of decades, and this industry continues to go through. It takes loud conviction voices to make that change. Rob's done it incredibly well across a number of businesses. Luis, even MSP Confidential itself, all the things you do with the community inside of ScalePad and have done previously with IT Glue and at N-able, it really does take very talented people with absolute conviction to push this entire trillion-dollar industry forward step by step, and you can count on a couple of hands those people, and certainly you two I would consider a part of that, and Mike certainly from day one was a part of that. So we thank him for everything he's done. He's done a lot for all of us. As Rob said, he was a competitor to ours, but we held him, the entire team over there, Mark Scott and Gavin and Derek, and what JP has done over the last number of years with that business are real leaders in the industry, and it's sad to lose one.
Yeah. Yeah, well said, Dan. There's like you said, a handful of people that were there at the beginning trying to build this. I've talked about this, I guess, maybe as I'm getting older, as we all are starting to age out of this industry and passing it on to the next generation, who aren't nearly ready to take it on, but we're working on it. It's funny because you think about where we were, 15 years ago. And by the way, I appreciate you putting me in that class. I don't put myself in that class because when I joined, you were the one that taught me everything there was to know about managed services. I didn't even know what MSP was until, or I think your favorite line was, I didn't even know how to spell MSP before I met you. So, I appreciate that because, there is a high class of people that were there at the beginning that were pushing the stream, and none of us envisioned that it was going to be the size that it is today, that it was going to have the impact worldwide that it has had today. And there's, again, a few handful of people that were there at the starting gate, and Mike was definitely one of them. The team at N-able was definitely one of them. And I think you said it, all those folks there, I feel bad because, they had an opportunity to get to know him a lot better than I did. But, I think about all the MSPs that he potentially touched, all the businesses that he potentially touched over the years, and turned it into, like you said, $1 trillion of business worldwide. Wouldn't have been there without a lot of these people from the start.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thanks guys for sharing your comments and thoughts. He'll be sorely missed, no doubt. And I think the days to come hopefully will sort of turn into comfort and rejoicing in some of the things that we can learn from his contributions to the channel and the industry, and that's kind of the cycle of it, isn't it? And it's kind of ironic that we were scheduled to talk about the MSP opportunity here, because that was precisely kind of the thing that Mike was always chasing, is what is that MSP opportunity. Well, Dan, I know you only want to pop in for a couple minutes here and say hi to Rob. Remind him again of who taught him everything he knows. So
he still calls me to check on the definition of MSP once in a while, just to be clear. So it's anyway. Yeah, I look forward to the contribution. I think what you guys again are both doing for the industry and propelling us all forward. This conversation is a testament to that. So I am going to let you two experts have that conversation and share your thoughts and insights for those who are listening in. And I thank you both for everything and letting me crash this and to comment a little bit about our friend Mike. So have a great show. I will see you in Vancouver soon, Luis, and Rob on the road not soon enough. So thanks very much to both of you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, you're our other godfather in many ways. Dan's been around from the very beginning too, and advocating for the industry and advocating for a lot of what we do. And Dan and yourself, I jokingly made the comment on my LinkedIn post about today that you're the first to announce that you don't know anything about cybersecurity, because you make that joke often. But then my job, of course, is to throw you under the bus at any opportunity I get. But I commented also that you've been very keen in always seeing what that MSP opportunity is, and I'm curious to sort of get a bit of your maybe historical trend mapping of that opportunity, because I kind of maybe sets the stage for what's to come in the next 5 to 10 years as well.
Yeah, I actually, so the comment that I made was that I know nothing about technology. It's not so much specifically cybersecurity. And then you start thinking that you're getting, kind of get to know it. And then all of a sudden you have a conversation with somebody like Matt Lee, and all of a sudden you realize you know nothing. You're right back to the start. I didn't.
By the way, we can count. Many of us can count ourselves in that boat. By the way, Matt Lee is the ultimate equalizer of how little we know.
I completely agree. And it's a pleasure working with him every day. But there are times when I'm like, all right, you've gone well beyond where I can continue to contribute here. So thanks. The comment I made, when I first started in IT, it was way back at Compact Computers, when IT was a lot more simple than it is today, because it was just desktops and laptops and servers. Few peripherals here and there, but it was way simpler. This is before even the cloud and all those types of things. Man, that makes you sound old when you say crap like that, right? So I, as the story goes, I was in the financial space, working for Bank of Montreal, and running a very, very good sales team over there, and had a kid that was working for me who moved over to Compact Computers. And Compact wanted to hire a good sales leader. They didn't want to hire a technician or a technician that knew sales. So, they kind of went out and started looking at, who are the best salespeople, went to their own staff and said, who's the best manager you ever worked for? And my name came up and interviewed over there, and I came and got the job. And I remember my first day, I was sitting there, and I have this team of people that I've inherited, a few of which wanted the job that I had taken. And I said to them, I said, okay, so what do we do here? And they're like, we sell servers, desktops, and laptops to businesses. And I'm like, okay, so what's a server? And they thought I was joking. And then when they realized I wasn't joking, a few of them literally went to HR to complain that this was such a bad hire. Anyway, I figured out what the server was eventually, sold to quite a few of them. And that's kind of where we got started. But the key is, and I think as even the managed services opportunity is changing, this whole idea of being immersed with tech, knowing, the in-depth parts of how it works, how it functions, being able to take something apart and put it back together. It was important, I think, for the early start of this industry, but it's becoming less and less important as we see more and more people that are joining this industry that know less and less about that technology piece. Yeah. Funny enough, I'm on the board of directors for CompTIA, and there's a phenomenal work report that they put out on a quarterly basis, and the kind of the status of work. And as we know, over 22, 23, there was a mass shortage of good sales engineers for MSPs, and that curve has gone down a little bit. There's anticipation that it will go back up, and the demand for good sales engineering help will go back up. But right now, it's kind of gone down a little bit. But one of the interesting angles is they're looking at the next generation that's coming in. And if you think about it, I know you have children, I've got children, and I think about these kids. It's not like when we grew up where you could go and build your own computer. You could take a computer apart and change the components out to try to make it bigger, better.
You had no choice.
I remember trying to swap out video cards to try to get newer games to play, those kinds of things. that's not the way it works anymore. These kids are comfortable with technology. They're not afraid of technology, but they have no idea how it works. And they're not tinkerers, right? So you have a whole new generation of kids that are coming up. I call them kids, but they're starting to get into the workforce, who are not afraid of technology, not afraid of taking a few more risks, and are a little bit more entrepreneurial than what we typically have seen in the managed services space. So that's kind of like a really interesting angle that I've seen coming around just recently.
Well, it's the expectation that it just works. It's that transition from interesting thing to critical utility, like electricity. You don't think about how the electricity works when you hit that power switch on the wall, and I think technology is following in the same path. And it's interesting to see the small businesses that MSPs support. That expectation continues to drive a bit of the, I guess, commoditization of this work in the market, but at the same time, it's also raising the bar of expectation. Never mind the whole cybersecurity landscape and the challenges that brings to the whole equation. But so it's an interesting trend, no doubt that MSPs are coming across way more competition. More people can do the same thing, or more of the technology itself just works out of the box. Businesses that are quote unquote born in the cloud, there's no longer a need to really get somebody to come and install your apps and set up a server. Like all these things are going away. And not slowly, by the way. I feel like the transition was slow to start 5 years ago, but now you're seeing any business that starts has kind of no need for an IT consultant until they start to get into deeper data, business requirements, the consulting, connecting apps and APIs and stuff like that. And so certainly that's one of the opportunities that I see going forward, is getting closer to that consulting opportunity, those analytics, those APIs, and connecting the data for their customers. But curious, from your perspective on the marketplace side of things, Pax8 is in front of so many vendors in the line card, and you guys, I imagine, get asked by hundreds of others that want to come onto the line card. And so you're seeing all the trends in the marketplace of the vendors that are popping up.
Yeah. It's the MSP, yeah. Just back to your previous comment, and then we can talk kind of about where the evolution is going. It's interesting how as you said, like, we are seeing the buyer persona change. We're seeing the way in which they're going to consume technology change. We're seeing that how they're going to interact with the MSP change. Nothing new, man. Like, we've been dealing with this for how many years, right? We saw evolution. Before you and I were here, evolution from typewriter to PC, from PC to internet, the cloud adoption, even before it was called the cloud, like, we saw data centers, being popped up left, right, and center before we saw standardization. We've seen technology continue to evolve in the way in which humans interact with technology, and the role of the managed service provider within there. We've seen it change over decades and decades and decades. It's going to continue to evolve. And I think the relevancy of the MSP is probably more so important today than it ever has been, but probably not as recognizable as it has traditionally been. I think when we saw the pandemic hit and all of a sudden MSPs were considered essential services, and people were frantically trying to figure out IT, we saw a bunch of enterprise struggling in the work from home movement. We've seen cybersecurity obviously explode from a vulnerability perspective as a result of work from home and the way in which people change. So, we went through that, but now we're coming back out of that. And I think this is where, this evolution of the reliance upon the channel is going to be absolutely critical. And, one of the things that we do at Pax8 is, because we're a channel only, we're an MSP only organization, I believe similar to yourselves, where, it's important that these managed service providers are successful. And they're going to be successful, but we want to expedite that. We want to make that journey easier. We want to make it more rapid so that there isn't a hesitation, there isn't a hiccup, there isn't some complete, total weird business transformation that you have to go through before you can start profitability. So we've already on this recurring revenue, building your business, land and expand journey. And we talked about it at the top. This is a worldwide piece now. It's not just the US and Canada anymore. It's like globally, managed services is a recognizable business model for small, medium business IT. So, I think that's going to be and continue to be really, really critical.
You know, on that success of the MSP, I think this is super interesting because I feel like there is an inflection point of growth and scalability that MSPs reach. You know, and it's on a spectrum. Some reach it sooner, some reach it later. But there's a lot of like slow growth too. You know, it is a service business ultimately, and I think that dictates to some extent how much you can do in a short amount of time. But it was interesting because I saw you attended Kevin Damgani's companies. I forget his company's name.
IT
IT
Partners Plus. Yeah.
IT Partners Plus. You went to their SKO, and it's. I was thinking to myself how interesting it is that certain MSPs of a certain size are behaving like fast, high growth SaaS companies, for example. But that a lot of MSPs below that inflection point, it's a magical inflection point. I don't know what it is. Are really not doing some behaviors and some of those things. And you go to a number of these. We attend a number of these for our partners throughout the year as well. And it's always fascinating just to see the change in mindset between a fast growth MSP versus sort of the lifestyle or just the slow organic growth MSP. And just curious on your comments on that.
Yeah, historically, this has always been, it's always been kind of if you think about kind of the history of the MSP, and when people ask me, what does an MSP look like? What they look like before, and Dom Ghani is an interesting IT Partners Plus out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. If you want to look them up, bootstrapped the company himself, started the company himself. I believe with an engineering background, loved the technology, played around with the technology. I don't think Kevin's even 40 yet, maybe getting closer to 40, and he's already acquiring MSPs from across the country and growing his business that way. It's a reflection upon what the MSP space is. Prior to this inflection point, it was basically a bunch of guys that liked technology that would get a phone call from somebody who was willing to pay them to come and fix something that was too complicated to understand. It's funny. I'll give Austin McCord some credit here because he came to me probably about 10 years ago, the founder of Datto, and he said to me, "Hey, we should start talking to the kids that are in universities, that are in high schools about jobs in managed services and beyond being techs. We should start talking to them about the entrepreneurial opportunity, the opportunity to come in and build something, even though you may not know how technology necessarily works." Back to our original conversation. Like a lot of ideas that Austin came up with, I told him he was crazy. Turns out he was right, which again is most of his ideas. And we're seeing that. We're seeing a younger generation come up. When you see, and Luis, you're seeing this. You've got to be seeing this with the MSP consolidation, with the acquisitions. A lot of the guys that we know and grew up with in this space are starting to retire, and they're selling their businesses. They're selling their businesses to the next generation that are younger. They're more entrepreneurial. They're less adverse to change. They're less adverse to risk. They're looking at growing and expanding. This whole idea, and I always hated the term, but this lifestyle business, or you're a boutique shop. I always dislike those terms, or pigeonholing people into those terms, because it sounded like almost negative. It's amazing how many of these people now are looking at this, and Kevin and his business and his team over there are a perfect example of this, where 10 customers, 100 customers, 1,000 customers isn't enough. We got to go more. We got to go more. We got to go more. Dan makes a great point there. We talk about the MSP, the traditional MSP, as an accidental entrepreneur. Now we have people getting into the space because of market opportunity. We have private equity companies that are starting managed service providers or consolidating managed service providers, and giving them the infrastructure and the support and everything that they need. We're growing up. It's a more mature space than it ever has been before. As vendors, we're way more mature than we've ever been before. I remember stupid open letters back in the day between CEOs of vendors and putting the MSP in the middle. It was like high school back in the day. It's not like that anymore. There's too much money at risk. There's too many lives at risk, and it's a really cool space to have grown up in and be a part of now.
Yeah, and I think to Dan's comment again, even though it can be a weak spot, especially as they find their footing, find their way, or even find that influx of cash or PE or equity or what have you, that sometimes takes a while to manifest itself, because the reality is a lot of PE firms or equity are not looking for the $500,000 gross revenue MSPs. They're looking for the 5 million plus, MSPs. And so they kind of have to prove their salt for a little while before they even get a chance at bat. I think the challenge, though, however, is that even the ones that do, they may have grown or gotten there very organically and still be very heavily dependent on what is uniquely a talent, I think, of everybody in the space, which is being a service business, right? And there's still that sort of dichotomy of like, how do you grow a service business really fast when service doesn't necessarily lend itself to fast growth? But this is, I think, where the expertise of private equity is also. I think they're learning a bunch in the process too. I have conversations with folks in the PE space all the time, because they're all trying to learn desperately more about like what is the thing that's driving the MSPs themselves. Like what do customers care about right now? What are some of the trends, like whether it's compliance or the cybersecurity stuff or marketplaces or what have you. So super interesting dynamic, and I love it. I love those conversations when they happen.
I do too, and you see the amount of money that they've parked for this space, where they're looking to invest in this space. And let's be honest, though, right? And you got to take the good with the bad here. The reason why our industry has exploded the way it has is because of this money coming in, venture capitalists and private equities. They're investing here not out of the kindness of their heart, not because they want to see SMB IT grow, not because they're big fans of managed services or MSP business owners. It's because they see opportunity. It's because they know that they can invest $1 and turn it into 10. And we've seen that repeatedly over and over and over again. There was a joke back in the day where larger vendors, all the ones that we know, and I was going to say love, but love is a harsh word in that space, used to come in and used to come down and would acquire a technology that was focused on MSP or focused exclusively channel only. And when they would acquire it, it wasn't because they were coming down to invest in the SMB IT. It wasn't, they were not investing in MSP. What they were doing was buying technology to bring it to their enterprise space. So we would watch these vendors that would, do wonderful things in SMB, and then all of a sudden they get scooped up and then they're gone. And then that would create an opportunity for another new vendor to kind of come into the space. Now, these days, it's not so much like that. Now what we're actually seeing is the private equity firms, even the larger vendors that are out there that are acquiring these businesses, aren't acquiring it because they want the tech to bring to enterprise. They're acquiring it because they want access to the SMB IT. It's finally no longer this dark corner. There is massive opportunity here. I as well have had and continue to have conversations with investors and private equity companies that are really, really keen on this business. And I mentioned it before, this isn't just an American thing. This is worldwide. I'm seeing investments coming out of countries that I didn't even know had a managed services play. So I think we're going to continue to see this, and that creates a lot of opportunity for everybody that's in this space right now, whether you're with a vendor or a managed service provider.
I was having a bit of this conversation the other day with Chris Day, because one of the things that I'm the first to admit I have romanticized a bit of this idea of technology support and service. I think a lot of folks come into this industry, we're not thinking of the opportunity. We're not thinking of, the revenue potential and some of the stuff that's happening, but rather, there's this interesting hero complex and the desire just to be, the person that helps out that small business and keeps them out of harm's way. And I think, I see this happen when a business focused or sales mindset driven individual goes and buys a franchise of a CMIT or of another, type of outlet like that, and are really going out to market to do the market thing. But you also see the community very much is driven around. You don't see conversations so much between MSPs in the public about the growth and the opportunity. You see more about, the technology and helping people. And so this is, I think, a transition or evolution that the market is going through, the industry is going through, no?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's focusing on the softer skills of the managed service provider along. I mean, yes, there's the ongoing communication of how do I and what tools are you using? But there are even better conversations that are having. But again, they're still kind of kludgy. There's still conversations that we just don't even know how to have outside of
Yeah.
potential peer groups. Peer groups have really and continue to take off because it's the opportunity to have these conversations about how do I grow this business. Quite incredible though to see how these engineers and techs have really become entrepreneurs and really become
Hmm.
successful. And we talk about the Peter Mulbys, the Kevin Donganis, even Daniel and what he's doing up in Canada and his business. It's incredible stuff. Incredible stuff.
Yeah. No, and it's exciting to see because I think because there is a bit of that cross section of those folks that are doing it and are still very much technicians, so to speak. I think they help some of the others see the opportunity and cross over, and it's not just this distant thing out in the field that you cannot achieve or that you have to have a certain growth or size. And the reality is that the majority of the opportunities we're talking about are available to all spectrums of MSP. And so I think that's the fascinating thing, that this is not exclusive to the $25 million plus MSPs, but rather you can be a 3, 5, 10-person shop and still go do some of this amazing stuff. So very
Yeah,
exciting for the industry for sure.
yeah, absolutely, it is. But it's the whole business model that we've built, right? It doesn't matter how many licenses you're buying. It doesn't matter what your buying power is. Those kinds of
Mm.
things. When it comes to working with vendors such as yourself, myself, those kinds of things, obviously you're seeing the enterprise vendors still, have minimums and stuff. But to be honest, that's why, Pax8 has also been very successful, is helping those partners feel and work with these large vendors and continue to do that. There's risk though, right? And I think this is where we wanted to turn this conversation, is that the buyer piece of this is changing. Things are starting to shift again. I don't know if it's a condition of kind of the next generation that's coming up, or whether it's now coming out of the pandemic, we had to be a lot more reliable upon ourselves. I think it's probably a combination of all of these things. You look at the amount of information that's available online these days in order to be able to shop for things that you typically would be intimidated by. I'll give you a perfect example was I need a new washer dryer, right? And I haven't bought a washer and dryer in 10 years. Um, I'm curious as to what's changed as far as the technology goes, all those types of things. But rather than go into a store, which is where I bought mine 10 years ago, and talk to the appliance guy and figure out which one was the best one for me and then buy it and bring it home or have them bring it home, I'm not doing that. I'm actually finding myself doing research, sitting there online, taking a look at what's the newest model, who's the best manufacturer, what are the ratings, what are other people saying about it, this whole crowd sharing way in which Amazon does business, the way in which people consume things. It's now bleeding over into the technology side. And there's some interesting data that's starting to come out around this. I'll point to a report around Canalys specifically, and Jay McBain mentions this, where buyers now are starting to do research and potentially make buying decisions 2 months before they're actually calling their MSP. Whereas before, you would just go into the appliance shop, you would just call the MSP and go, I have a problem. How do we solve this? And the MSP's part of the MSP responsibility was to go and find what was the right vendor, what was the right technology, what solves that problem. Now people are doing it and potentially bypassing the MSP, trying to go directly with these vendors,
Mm.
or calling the MSP, but only after they've kind of got it in their heads of what it is that they want. And it's funny because it kind of throws us back to the old reseller model where what do you want, an IBM, a Compaq, or an HP, or that kind of stuff. And we can't go back like that because there's with the risks with cybersecurity, with all those data protection, compliance, all those types of things. They're just too big these days for a lot of these people to do just a narrow search on kind of what is the next best SaaS application that they want to install. So this is, and you made the comment off the top there, and it kind of brings that comment home, which is MSPs are no longer can't be reactive fulfillment. And when it comes to IT, we need to be proactive in front and be more consultative, right? When it comes to IT and IT decisions. So good news is everybody's outsourcing more and more and needs to outsource more and more. Good news is that a lot of vendors are choosing the channel as ways to actually fulfill these things. Good news is that the tools and the technology that are available to the MSPs are better than ever before, not only for them to be able to sell through to their end users, but also how they manage their business. good news is there's a ton of individuals out there that can help, and information that can help. And the community that we've all built together is a very open and sharing one. Um, but with all these things, we still need to get the buyer engaged. We still need to keep the buyer up front and talking to us early in the journey, as opposed to reacting and waiting. Waiting for that phone call to come in, and it's just being assumptive and being part of the process is going to be more critical than ever before.
100%. And one area to Martial's comment on this is the optimism that I have specifically around a topic like GRC or compliance is very much in that category of MSPs have to get in front of the conversation. AI is another one, but they have to get in front of the conversations. And AI is maybe a bit of the Wild West for another couple of years, but compliance is really coming to a head now because businesses are really starting to see that they're not going to have a choice. I was saying on one of my recent conversations with somebody how frustrated I am, generally speaking, by why aren't more businesses just not doing the right thing yet? They're waiting kind of to be forced by legal standards or compliance regulations to do what we all know should be done. And so, but I think that in itself is giving me a ton of optimism, because this is a big realm of opportunity for MSPs to really come in and have those conversations, have them early, help those customers transition from a mentality of delegation of stuff to their IT provider to actually be involved in part of their own rescue in doing the compliance things they need to do, standing up that security committee, being responsible for the things they need to do from an HR and policy perspective. There's so much work there to be done. And by the way, the revenue opportunity of the average client in compliance can often sunset whatever they're charging for their typical managed services, which is losing value every day because of some of these other trends that we're seeing, of course. But that's just one aspect. I'm curious what other optimist aspects you see out there in the market too.
I am a total optimist when it comes to these things, and I'm going to continue to do that because it's paid off. It's worked. There's so many good things that are happening around us, despite the fact that we tend to get caught up in kind of like it's the forest and the trees. We're looking at the trees and not necessarily looking at the bigger picture sometimes. And when you step back and look at the forest, like, the optimism should be there. What other industry would you possibly want to go and join right now that is growing as quickly or has as good of a community as this one? Honestly, I can't even fathom wanting to go work or do something else, or the opportunity would be better somewhere else. But I'm also not musically inclined like you are. Maybe you'll make more money in music, but who knows?
Hey, I hear the payroll industry is ripe for disruption.
Oh God, not really. I mean, nothing changes over there. It's taxation. That's it. AI is an interesting one, and we can debate all day long whether AI is here to stay, whether AI is going to work. That's not the point. The point is that we've got this big, massive conversation that needs to happen. A lot of MSPs are shying away from it or haven't done enough research to be able to go and have intelligent conversations. I was with an MSP not that long ago, probably 2-3 months ago, a growing MSP, a sizable MSP, asked him what he was doing with AI. He said, nothing. I get calls from my clients all the time. I tell them to stay away from it. Don't touch it. Don't look at it. Don't worry about it. Meanwhile, I'm now looking, I've got 4 different applications up right now, and there is some AI attached to some of it, including Copilot everywhere. This is an opportunity for us. Why are we shying away from having these conversations? Sure, maybe AI is the next big data, 5G, blockchain, whatever, but maybe it's not. Maybe it is the next internet, big kind of revolution and change the way. The key to it, and then the value of everything that we do in our space, is our ability to have these conversations now, even though it's not something that's necessarily going to impact our lives for another 6 months, year, 5 years. The fact that we should be and can have these conversations is important. I had this reminiscing moment. I think you were around at this time. Might have even been you we were talking about this. When I worked for Compact Computers, I was managing the top 5 resellers, we called them back then. It would have been managed services shops in the province of Ontario. These are sizable companies. When I say sizable, probably about $15-20 million back in the day. And all of them were opening data centers. All of them were opening up clouds because they knew that the clouds were kind of the next version of technology. So they were buying they were buying warehouses, they were buying racks, they were buying servers, even though they hadn't quite figured out what the plan was quite yet. And I'm not suggesting by any means that we all start throwing a ton of money at AI, but at least understanding what AI what is or what it could be, similarly to what these people were doing, and trying to understand what the cloud was and what the cloud was going to be. That's our job. That's where the rub comes in. And if we want to continue to be the consultant that the end users continue to go to first, that's when you have to have these conversations. I'll ask you the question, and maybe you'll surprise me with an answer here. When's the last time, or when's the first time you heard about an MSP doing a lunch and learn where AI was the topic?
I actually just heard from Michael Goldstein of LAN Infotech last week. We were chatting just about this, and he is, perhaps an exception because you're right. I don't hear this very often, but he goes and talks to his local, chambers and business groups, and he's driving a bit of the interest in the conversation and getting in front of it. And I think this is, well, again, one of the opportunities for MSPs is to do that more at the social level, the social selling, the relationships in your community. A lot of those things I think are going to drive the differentiation in the next few years. But just to your comment about compact, I don't know if maybe you got swept in the, vortex of, when all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, because, the data center craze was probably created by the compacts and the people that made and sold servers. Like, we need everybody to have a data center. And I feel like a bit of the same transition happened when we went to cloud. It's like, oh, everybody needs to move their stuff to the cloud. And now we're kind of pulling back from that a little bit, I find, because the average SMB, it's not more cost effective for them to be in the cloud for when they need, a lot of file storage or what have you. And so it was interesting. We was sort of snapped back to some of the old ways because a lot of MSPs are finding that it's difficult to justify the costs of moving all their servers and functionality into the cloud. And so again, it's not a mold that fits every particular situation. But it sort of puts us a little bit back at the starting point of having to rethink, okay, well, what really is the strategy here? What is the opportunity? But it's about getting closer to the customer, no doubt. What's Dan's comment here? Tech layoff lowers. Well, there's been another rash of layoffs from Google this week. I saw the news about 1,000 people being laid off. But in the context of 185,000 people, suddenly it doesn't seem too bad. And, you see the posts from folks about, I'm opening my network to everybody that's being laid off. And I think there is a ton of community that happens there. And but this is also where innovation happens, by the way. And so I feel like if these layoffs sometimes didn't happen, I think innovation would stagnate. And that's another area that I think you've been around with both Datto. You saw it from a business perspective and a business delivery mechanism, or even sort of against the current of being an MSP channel only business with Datto, that I think everybody at that time would have told you you're probably crazy to do that and not try to go up market enterprise and all these things. But so your thoughts on layoffs and how they trigger innovation, perhaps?
It's these things happen. They come through ebbs and flows, and there's a lot of organizations that try to avoid this as much as possible. There's a lot of organizations that need to stay lean. We've had this debate over the last couple of years: is the economy good enough? Are we going to slip into a recession? Those kinds of things, and you could argue that either way. It goes exactly to what you're saying. When you think about some of these MSP business owners, why did you start a business? You started a business because you got laid off at some point in time, right? Or there was something at some event where you were working for somebody else, and it kind of forced you to say, you know what, maybe I can go do this on my own. And we've seen this over and over and over again. There's other parts of it too. There's an organization had this really cool idea to do this mentorship program with younger individuals that were in university who are looking specifically for careers in IT. And this mentorship program, what they did was they brought them out to an event, and they put these kids, these students, in front of a bunch of industry recognizable people, including myself, that have a conversation with them, talk to them about the IT landscape. Every single one of these kids wanted a job at Facebook or Google. They were not interested in working anywhere else. It was either Facebook or Google. That was the life dream, was to come out of school and go work for Facebook or Google. And I shared with them, I'm like, you're thinking too small here. And you're thinking small because what you're going to do is you're going to go and be a cog in a wheel over at Facebook or Google. You're not going, you have a magnificent opportunity to kind of build your own empire, build the next Facebook, build the next Google, rather than go and work for somebody else. And, try to really inspire these kids to potentially take a look at a smaller organization that, yeah, maybe they're not going to get paid as much out of the gate, but there's a great opportunity for equity, great opportunity to grow with this organization. When I joined Data, we probably had 100 employees. That grew to about 2,000. And, we sold the business to private equity. We went public. We sold it again privately. Like the massive opportunities I probably made and learned more through that than I ever would have going and working for a Microsoft or a Google or a Facebook. Unfortunately, every single one of those kids went off and started working for Google or Facebook because, that's a lot of what they'd see. And now you look at, like you said, 185,000 employees. There was a recently, I can't remember which vendor it was, so I won't name it, but it was one of these larger vendors that did a layoff. And it was an employee from one of them. And I think she had been working for the organization for 15 years and found out via email on Monday morning that she didn't have a job anymore. Like, it's that kind of stuff where it's like, we have this magnificent opportunity in our space to bring in really, really smart people. And I'm seeing them, actually. I'm seeing way more smarter people coming into our space and looking for jobs, who have got great resumes, great pedigrees. And now they're looking at us going, I want to come into this space, because, again, they're seeing the opportunity. But this goes back again to a lot of the investors that are coming in the private equity space, for example. They're bringing their own people, like really, really smart people, and bringing them in and saying, hey, pay attention to this. Take a look and see what you think over here. And, there's people that typically would never even look at us or think about SMB that are now all of a sudden looking at it going, I could make a good career run here at this. So, I think that the more that these larger enterprise companies are laying off, the better it is for our space, both from a technology innovation perspective, even from a skill set perspective of what we're going to add to our space, because there's good jobs, good paying jobs here.
So you made me think of something that maybe annoys me a little bit. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this slight tangential rabbit hole I'm going to bring you down into. What are your thoughts on the folks on LinkedIn that put ex-Google or ex-Facebook on their LinkedIn, profile titles? And why does it matter?
I'll add to that. I'll pile on to that. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But you know what? A lot of times, there's by saying I worked for them for a number of years, they're thinking that it automatically sets them up for a job somewhere else because they've got that tenure on their resume. And we know this, right? And I saw this with Data. If you had 5 years with Data, that gave you a certain level of credibility in order to go and find another job within our space. So maybe that's what they think. I'll pile onto yours though, and what irritates me is when somebody calls themselves like an MSP whisperer. Like, come on, what the hell is that? And or MSP guru. Like, and there's way too many of them, because at the same time as we've been growing this industry, there's also a bunch of people that are trying to take advantage of this space and come into it with, I guess, some level of instant credibility. But yeah, I know what you're saying. I personally would never do that. But I can understand why some are doing it. I don't know why it's a crazy pet peeve of yours, though.
I don't know. It's just one of those random things that irks me. Holy moly, man. The opportunity just continues to abound. Let me ask you about, since this is one of your topics of expertise, deep expertise, never mind, is this cybersecurity topic and the opportunity for MSPs. I think, the conversation I have with Matt or other folks here and there is that we seem to be finally settling in to the expectation of what needs to be done from a cybersecurity perspective. A lot of the compliance frameworks are helping. Tom Lawrence, who I'm sure posted on LinkedIn a funny meme, which is, your business is not too small to get hacked. It's just too small to be in the news. And but we've been traditionally in the industry where a lot of the things that SMBs end up doing is because it was newsworthy or they found out something that happened to a colleague or something similar to them. It's not until they recognize the similarity in a situation that people tend to take action. But I think people are finally making that transition, be like, yeah, we understand the importance of this, and starting to make a move on the cybersecurity piece. And I'm curious for the marketplace vendor perspective. I can't imagine what percentage of your vendors are in cybersecurity, or how many more cybersecurity vendors are knocking on your door. And I'm curious about this trend or this cybersecurity opportunity.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot, right? There's no shortage of cybersecurity organizations, vendors that are coming in. There's no shortage of even some newer technologies that we're starting to see in this space that the MSPs now have the ability to go and take to their end users. Unlike historically, now you're starting to see enterprise vendors having SMB strategies. We saw this a number of years ago with Sentinel One coming into the SMB space and doing a pretty good job at selling their services within the SMB space. We saw more recently CrowdStrike now coming into this space. So good news is that we are starting to see baked enterprise class technology coming in and coming up with SMB strategies via the channel, which is phenomenal. Interestingly enough, so I got invited to sit on a panel at Sentinel One's conference recently. It's called OneCon, and it basically it's all for end users, enterprise end users, mostly CISOs of very large organizations, like Fortune 500 kind of thing. And I'm sitting there going, man, what am I going to talk about? Right? I'm coming from the SMB MSP world, and they want me to sit in front of a bunch of CISOs for enterprise Fortune 500 and talk about PAX 8. Like, it's not our audience. It's not who is our target. So I'm kind of going into this, and Matt Lee and I drove down to it together and had an opportunity to brainstorm in the car together as far as what do we say to these people, and we came up with some really, really cool stuff and kind of made it really relevant. And when you think about what it is that we're doing in the world and why it's so important, and I'm talking about we as in the vendors like you and I'm talking about all of us in the MSP space.
Technology.
So I started off with, first of all, Matt has this wonderful line. I'm not sure if he created it. I'm not sure if he stole it from somewhere, but at first I ever heard it was out of his mouth. He talks about the cybersecurity poverty line and how in the SMB space, we all live, especially SMB end users, live under the cybersecurity poverty line. I think that's a brilliant analogy because it needs to get better. It needs to be better. And it's not so much that the SMBs aren't paying attention. It's, again, our job to make sure that they're getting the education, they're getting the technology, they're getting the prices that are necessary in order for them to get above that cybersecurity poverty line. But the example that we used as far as what the impact is that we have on the SMB, or what MSPs have on the SMB IT, we all remember the Target hack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard this yet? Have you heard this?
Well, I remember the Target hack, obviously, but okay. I hadn't heard the poverty line comment. So carry on.
Okay, so the Target hack, right? You heard about this. It made the news. Why did it make the news? Because it's Target, and I can't remember the numbers, but it was hundreds of thousands of credit card numbers and whatnot that they actually lost. Do you remember how they got hacked?
No. I would have known back then when the news was out, but now I've forgotten why. Probably the same reason why all the other hacks happened. But
right, and this is when we talk about like the really cool stories about how these hackers are finding backdoors into these places. It was through an HVAC system, because the HVAC system was connected in, but the HVAC manufacturer is not thinking about cybersecurity the same way that Target needs to think about cybersecurity, or the same way that all these other organizations that are specifically being targeted. There's the we used to tell the story over at Datto all the time about the fish tank thermometer in Vegas that exposed all of the big high rollers lists to hackers. So it was an HVAC implementation. The HVAC was installed by a small medium business, and I know the name of the business is just an HVAC unit out of wherever the hack started. I won't give you the name, but it's there. But you're not going to hear that guy's small HVAC company name being talked about in the news. It's not. It's Target. So, when I'm talking to these, enterprise folks, when I was talking at this actual conference, it was, our job in the MSP space is to take care of these HVAC companies, to take care of these fish thermometer manufacturers. That is our audience. That is the people but they're all subcontracted to these larger organizations, which means why should you care? Why should anybody care about SMB cybersecurity? Why? Because they're in everywhere that we're working day in and day out worldwide. And that's why the MSP is going to be so critical through this whole process, is to make sure that these companies are safe, secure, educated, and doing what they need to do as they go and fulfill much larger enterprise type contracts.
Well, I think you kind of identified one of the challenges that exists generationally, which is, and I've had these conversations with some small business owners that are, maybe getting close to retiring, and you're talking about the cybersecurity and the things they need to do in the business over and over and over again. And they're like, they can have my stuff. I don't care. I'm not going to do anything at this point. I'll let the next person deal with it. And this is obviously a problem. So I think generationally, we have to sort of get past this interesting brick wall or firewall, if you will, that's not working. Port forwarded firewall. Technology jokes you might not understand, Rob. Sorry.
Or maybe they're just not funny.
That's more likely, actually. And so that is one of the transitions that's interesting. It was hella frustrating for me with some of the small business owners that were closer to that retirement, just not wanting to. That's not a priority right now. They're maximizing the sale of their business, and this is not on the radar. It's kind of a calculated risk, so to speak. But we know what happens with those. So
it's back to Tom Lawrence's post, right? It's just. I mean, we all know this. I was talking about ransomware before ransomware was fashionable to talk about. It's not about when it's or how or is it going to happen to me. It's about when it's going to happen to me. All that conversation, and that's another part of when we're talking about the buying persona changing. It's the next generation coming up. Not only do they have more information at their fingertips, but they care less about security than older generations or previous generations. This whole idea of they've already got my data. I might as well just keep going and hope they don't do anything with it. It's so dumb. But it also means that we just have to do a better job of why. Why is it that we need to make sure that all these things are safe and secure, that we're not willingly handing over, that we're not taking our defenses down? Like, why? And we're not doing a good enough job explaining that. And that is why people are responding with what they're responding with, which is, I don't really care, or it's too big of a battle, or it's never going to happen to me. We just have to keep fighting that fight.
Yeah, for sure. I think, the small business community very much has a similar lemming effect to the MSPs. And when enough of the small businesses have heard their own peers doing the thing and making the transition, I think that will start to, come into view. But man, we're short of 2 minutes here to the top of the hour. I'm going to try and not keep you past 1 o'clock Pacific here, but I have a couple speed round questions for you. Very important information that I think we need to know. First of all, what's the best sandwich? Not even your favorite.
Best sandwich?
Yeah.
So this is, I know you would just want a rapid, quick hit. By the way, it's a hot Italian, right? I'm from Toronto, and delis are not really a thing in Toronto. Or at least it wasn't when I was growing up. Like we had our Subways or our Mr. Subs. I moved down to Connecticut, and now there's a deli. Like I live in a really small town. There's like 6 delis in here. One day, my wife and I finally I can't remember what we were doing, watching the kids play soccer or something like that. And we went and got a sandwich from a deli. Dude, it is freaking life-changing. It is so much different than any other sandwich I've had in my entire life. So now, I despise going back to Toronto because there's no good delis compared to New York and Connecticut. I've discovered this whole thing, and it was this weird sandwich secret that I had no idea was a real thing. Anyway, there's this one really popular one here in Connecticut. I'm not sure if it stretches beyond that. It's called a Cluckin' Russian. It's a Russian chicken sandwich. It's phenomenal.
All right. Any deli sandwich at this point, it sounds like the answer was.
Pretty much.
Okay, here's another one. What's one thing that you own that you really should throw out?
I'm really good at getting rid of stuff. I'm not a hoarder by any means. One thing that I own that I really should throw out. That's a tough one. Let me think about that. Let me
All
think
right.
about that.
And the most used app on your phone, is it the Blue Jays app?
I do well. It is during baseball season. There's no doubt about that. Most used app probably Lyft. Only Lyft, Delta, Waze, because these are the ones that we use when we're traveling all the time. I have become more of a fan of Lyft than Uber. Uh, uh, More so because Uber came out with its status ratings and didn't give me the highest rating. So I was like, man, I'm going to switch to Lyft, and Lyft gives me Delta points. So, anyways, it's probably the airline stuff and expense report stuff. As sad as that sounds, personally though, you're probably right. It's probably Blue Jays, Leafs, anything Toronto related.
That's awesome, man. Well, listen, it'll be not soon enough before I see you again. It feels like it's been a couple months probably since IT Nation. You kind of dipped into IT Nation for half a day and then disappeared, promising to come back and never returning. So we haven't seen each other in a couple months, but I'm sure the conference season as it kicks up
I headed
in
to
earnest.
I headed to your part of the world. I didn't have a choice. I had a trip planned to South America, so I wanted to head down there.
That's
Sorry,
right.
I'm sorry you missed me.
Well, if I recall correctly, we're going to do a little road trip to go see the Can IT Con folks in
Yeah.
Kelowna in September, and so we're definitely looking forward to that. Dan Mitchell is still on the stream. He'll be glad to know we're all planning to come out to that. But thanks, Rob. I appreciate your time. Thanks for your thoughts and sentiments on Mike as well. I know that there's a lot still for the industries to have come to terms with over the next few weeks, but appreciate always your commentary and your thoughts on all this industry stuff, and can't wait to see you again soon, my friend. And until next time, thanks to everybody for tuning in. We're back here next Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern for MSP Confidential. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate you.